Hi Gators, it's Miss Hudgens, your principal. I have a book I want to share with you. Did you know that Tuesday, October 2nd is Custodian Appreciation Day? Well, this story by Louise Borden is called The A Custodian, and it made me start to think about the custodians we have here at Groves. Miss Rosario takes care of us all day and makes sure that our lunch tables are set up and that our lights are turned on and working. And if there's ever any kind of sickness, she takes care of that for us too. Well, our night custodians make sure the floors are clean, the trash is emptied, and that all of your desktops are also cleared off. So I think it's important for us to take a minute to recognize how much we appreciate our custodians. The word custodian means a watchman. Did you know that's what custodians do? They keep us, they guard us, they watch over us. So think about that as I read to you this story called The A Custodian. John Carrillo was the day custodian at Dublin Elementary School. Everyone liked Mr. Carrillo. The students, the teachers, Miss Greenwood, the school secretary, the cooks, the parents, and Mr. Vance, the principal. John Carrillo had been the custodian at Dublin Elementary for 19 years, and Miss Greenwood said she could count on one hand the days that John had been sick or missed work. Every day, the short, stocky custodian kept Dublin's hallways and rooms shiny clean with his mops and his brooms, and his soaps and his polish. And he had a key to every door and lock at school. Cling, cling, jingle, ring. You could always hear the swing of his keys when Mr. Carrillo headed down the hallway to the school office, or when he climbed up one of his tall ladders to replace a light bulb in the ceiling of the school gym. Cling, cling, jingle, ring. A good custodian always knew which key fit the right lock. Mr. Vance said John Carrillo could fix anything, and he was right about that. Mr. Carrillo knew about wiring and pipes and windows and lights. He was the man who had to keep all the parts of the building working in tip-top condition, even the parts that were old and tired. Mr. Carrillo had 2 special closets, all his own, with big black letters on them, Custodian. Those closets were crammed full of stuff, buckets and old rags and damp sponges, tools like hammers and pliers, boxes of nails and screws, and short and tall ladders that clattered and screeched whenever Mr. Carrillo hauled one out and carted it down the hallway to some task. John Carrillo was a jack of all trades. If a second-grade teacher needed an extra desk in her classroom, or if a heavy table had to be moved in the cafeteria, or if a toilet overflowed in the boys' bathroom, people always hurried to the school office and asked Mrs. Greenwood, "Do you know where Mr. Carrillo is?" Or ask, "Say, have you seen John?" Sometimes they just blurted out their words in a panic. "Go find the custodian, quick!" We do that to Miss Menchaca, don't we, when we need Miss Rosario. Every morning, John Carrillo came to school in the pitch black dark when most students were just waking up or eating their breakfast at home. He unlocked the big front red doors and switched on the lights, one by one by one, so that Dublin Elementary would look cozy and bright, even on the gloomiest days. John Carrillo wasn't a stylish man in his flannel shirts and his worn leather shoes, but he was no ordinary janitor. He was a custodian. Grace Siverson and her twin brother Zach were 3rd graders. Their mother was a 5th grade teacher at Dublin, and on many mornings when it was still dark outside, Miss Siverson and Gracie and Zach arrived at school soon after Mr. Carrillo had unlocked the front doors. "Good morning, Mr. Carrillo," the Siversons would call out like the notes of a song down the empty hall. Then Mrs. Siverson, carrying her satchel full of papers and books, would head to the teacher's workroom for a mug of hot coffee. Mr. Carrillo brewed a big pot each morning for the Dublin staff. Every teacher thought John Carrillo made the best coffee in the town. "Morning, you early birds," John would call back. The echo of these words always began the Siverson school day. Mrs. Siverson told the twins, Mr. Carrillo is an A-plus custodian. He uses a lot of elbow grease, so the school will run smoothly for others. I think he loves every single brick in this old building. Dublin's custodian knew the names of all the students, even the kindergartners. Gracie didn't mind her nickname, and neither did Zach. No one else at school had a special nickname like Early Birds. While Mrs. Siverson got ready for her 5th grade day, Gracie and Zach began to follow Mr. Carrillo around the building. They watched him at many tasks and asked, "Can we help too?" "Your early birds are no bother," the custodian told Mrs. Siverson. "They keep me company on these quiet mornings." Then he winked at the twins and said, "And if you do good work for me, I'll bet I can rustle up a donut or two." The twins liked the way Mr. Carrillo stretched out his words. And that's how the early birds became the school custodian's #1 assistants the year they were in 3rd grade. Zach became a whiz at tidying up the forgotten lunchboxes and single mittens in the lost and found bin. He wiped sticky handprints from the kindergarten tables and lugged a shipment of clay to the art room. Gracie carried boxes of school supplies up to the stairs in the 5th grade and down the stairs to the 1st grade. She untangled long extension cords and counted out the traffic cones before the big yellow buses arrived. The twins took turns holding down the dustpan for Mr. Carrillo's quick sweeps of his big broom. There was always something that needed doing somewhere in the building. Before long, the early birds knew every Dublin classroom, from the basement to the 2nd floor, what was different about them and what was the same. Some were full of messy projects. Some were orderly and neat. Some had cages of snakes or gerbils or guinea pigs or chicks just hatched. The twins loved following Mr. Carrillo in his early morning work. They loved being his assistants, and they loved his donuts. Sometimes Mr. Carrillo and the early birds stood together in the quiet hallways and looked at displays of student work taped up on the long halls. The custodian always beamed like a father and said, "I sure am proud of all you kids. You do terrific work." Then he pointed up and down the hall. "This whole building's my classroom." One day, Gracie noticed something at Dublin Elementary that she had never seen before. There were special words in every classroom in different colors of ink. Words that were small on paper, but they meant something big. The words were on spelling papers and math quizzes, on dinosaur poems and homework pages. Gracie puzzled over those words from Monday to Thursday. She thought about them while she was helping Mr. Carrillo. She thought about them while she was waiting in line to go to recess. And she thought about them on the way to art and to music and to gym. Finally, Gracie told Zach about all her hard thinking. And she told her mom. And then she told her 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Davis, who told Mr. Vance. And the 5 of them had a top secret meeting in the principal's office and made a wonderful plan. Soon, everyone from kindergarten to 4th grade at Dublin Elementary School was whispering, "Our custodian, don't tell him. Shh, don't say. Your best handwriting, because we love Mr. Carrillo. He's for a custodian. Get the tape and markers. Shh, don't tell Mr. Carrillo. It's top secret." And they were working so hard. The next Monday, John Carrillo arrived at school early in the morning, in the pitch black dark. He pulled out his ring of keys and unlocked the big red front doors. He began to switch on the lights, one by one by one. It was then he saw the wonderful banner stretched across the main hallway. Did you see what they wrote? As he slowly walked around his building, John Carrillo couldn't help smiling. He saw the important words that Gracie Siverson had thought about. The words were everywhere, in the handwriting of students and teachers, on light switches, on doors, on heavy tables and extra desks, in the boiler room, and on the doors of the custodian closet. On buckets, on sponges, on ladders, on the clean, shiny floors, and on the railings of the stairwells. On sink faucets and up and down the hallways, and on all the tired parts of the building, and on the big coffee pot of the teacher's workroom. And he realized that this time they had been written for him. Do you want to see what the notes look like? There were words like super, excellent, terrific, A+, wow, mighty fine. I like that one. A little later that Monday morning, Mr. Carrillo waited near the big banner in the main hallway, and Gracie and Zach Siverson stood proudly beside him. Another week of school was about to begin. The big yellow buses lined up bumper to bumper in front of Dublin Elementary, the same as they always did, and a swish of their brakes, and a snap-flap of their doors, and the voices of 400 Dublin students filled up the shiny, clean lobby like a rising tide. Mr. Carrillo, Mr. Carrillo, hey, Mr. Carrillo! And in the midst of all the clamor and celebration, John Carrillo leaned down and whispered to Gracie and Zach, "A fine building is mighty nice, but it isn't much without the people inside it." A pack of second grade boys waved and yelled, "Thank you, Mr. Carrillo," as they hurried on by. The early birds nodded and smiled. Mr. Carrillo sure knew a lot about how to care for their school. He was an A+ custodian. And Miss Rosario and our night custodians are A+ custodians too. Listen to your teacher while they tell you what you can do for them. Have a great day.